Our next performer, he is actually a New York Times best-selling author. He is a best-selling author of 3 science books, The Dueling Neurosurgeons, The Disappearing Spoon, and The Violinist Thumbs. Each of his first 2 books were named Amazon Top 5 Science Books of the Year, and his work has been featured on NPR's Radiolab, All Things Considered, and Fresh Air. And he will be selling his books after the show at a discounted price because you guys all came to Science Comedy Night. Please join me in welcoming Sam Kean.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone. So, right around the time I moved back home after college, which was already humiliating enough, my parents started feeding stray cats in our backyard. They would buy these huge tins of Walmart cat food, and when you turn them over, nothing happened at first, but a second later, this hockey puck of horse meat inside would start quivering and then would plop down on the pavement, and then this mucus of gravy would dribble out afterward, and the whole thing just smelled terrible. But because this was wintertime in South Dakota, the cats used to get pretty desperate and fight over even this food. I'd be lying in bed sometimes at night, and I would hear these shrieks and howls from the backyard, and I would peek through my bedroom curtains and see this like Tasmanian devil tornado of fur going around outside. And not infrequently, there would be blood on the pavement the next morning. Clearly, then it made sense to bring these cats into our home as pets. So my parents adopted first a long-haired tabby named Ignatius, and then another tabby named Madeline, and then, you know, life's little blessings. Madeline was pregnant, so out popped Cassandra and Oliver. Now, I mostly ignored these cats except for one thing. I'm a science guy, science writer, and I'd started reading this very long, involved book about animal behavior called Sociobiology by Edward Wilson. And kind of the thesis of the book is that animal behavior is programmed. So by genes, hormones, environment, whatever, animal behavior is largely programmed. And Wilson himself was an ant expert, so it was kind of easy to think about ants as like these little chemical zombies marching around with no free will. But then he started working his way up through the animal kingdom, through fish, reptiles, birds, and then mammals, like cats. And that's when the book started to get a little eerie, because one thing Wilson mentioned was that when animals like cats feel overcrowded, they start to get very aggressive. Even very friendly, sweet animals will get very hostile and territorial if they feel overcrowded. And I noticed this coming true in my own life because my parents took in a 5th cat, Elliot. And it was like there was a phase shift suddenly in the household. It just pushed the cat population a little bit over the edge. Because I noticed Ignatius now was crawling up on the windowsills and pouncing on the other cats. And Cassandra would just, sharpen her claws on whatever furniture she could find. Worst, Oliver and Elliot used to get into literal pissing matches where they would just spray the living room curtains to mark territory. And the book predicted all of these kinds of behaviors would emerge, and it was really kind of unsettling how accurate it was. But, at the end of the day, these were cats. They were beasts. I mean, of course something like overcrowding is going to override their basic decency. And then a few months later, my brother also moved back home after college. Now we had 4 adult Homo sapiens living in one house. And we actually had a nice little honeymoon of family togetherness at first. I mean, my family really can be great sometimes. But then that cold South Dakota winter descended and started to coop us indoors. And the changes were actually kind of subtle at first. Like, it just felt like there was somebody always right behind me now, like marching up the stairs behind me or knocking on the bathroom door. And I started to feel more and more, I guess the word is territorial. Like, I just didn't want people in my room anymore, and I started hiding my things and little caches of food, my groceries in the pantry. I didn't really think about it, it just felt kind of natural. And then the fight started. So my mother would come up to me and say something pointed like, so when are you going to get that writing job you keep talking about? And I would jab back at her, say something mean about the cats, and things would escalate. And when I pushed her too far, she would actually grunt at me. Her neck would kind of swell out, and her face would flush red, and there'd be this guttural scream in her throat, like, when she pushed me too far, I'd get so sputtering mad I couldn't even say anything, and so I would make a face at her. I would kind of lower my brows and bare my lower canines like this, and didn't realize that these are both classic territorial displays. For his part, my brother said, I have got to get out of this zoo. So he went and joined the local gym, and he put on something like 35 extra pounds of muscle that year. He became the silver-backed gorilla, the alpha male of the household. Meanwhile, I'm reading this book, plugging away, completely oblivious to the reason for all these changes going on. And I'm working toward the book's final section on primate behavior. And Wilson said something kind of interesting about primate behavior, and that is primates, when they feel overcrowded, instead of getting aggressive sometimes they withdraw from social contact. Well, you know, it was a funny coincidence. My father, I noticed he was running a lot of these useless errands at night, where he would just go to his office and sit there. My brother and I, we weren't going out as often as we should have been, you know, not taking care of ourselves, not washing our hair as often as we should have been. We grew up these hideously patchy neck beards. I mean, we basically stopped grooming ourselves. And I was kind of picking at my beard in the mirror one day, ignoring the knocking, and it just sort of hit me that, oh my God, I'd become an ape from that book. And it was a real punch in the gut when I realized that, because, I mean, we all want to think about ourselves as being autonomous and having free will, but you can't fool biology. And I couldn't think of anything else to do except just keep reading ahead in the book and figure out what was going to happen to me next. And I had like a script of my life here. And that's when I read something that was simultaneously hopeful, but a little frightening too. And that is, a lot of apes on the cusp of adulthood disperse. So they leave their home troop and have to go make their own way in the world. And that's when I realized I had to escape. So I started applying for internships in different places, finally accepted one in St. Louis, a city that was 1,000 miles away where I didn't know anyone. And of course, as soon as I said yes, that honeymoon of family togetherness started up again. And on the day I left, my parents each gave me a big hug, and as I was backing up the driveway, I actually got a little choked up about the whole thing, because, I mean, one of the other big themes of that book, besides all the stuff about like overcrowding and aggression, was that family is really important to mammals. I mean, love for your family is as biological as anything, and again, you can't fool biology. But about 15 minutes later, I finally hit the open highway. And it was like my soul just kind of opened up inside me, because I looked to the left, and then I looked to the right, and there were no Homo sapiens around for the first time in as long as I could remember. And I just remember thinking, wow, this must be what it feels like for an animal when it escapes the zoo. Or maybe more accurately here, what it feels like for an ape when, after far too many years living in his parents' troop, he finally makes a decision and strikes out on his own for the very first time. So, thank you everyone for coming out.